Good evening, guys. We're going to talk about characterizing the shapes of data. Again, that's the big picture we've been working on, is that I need you guys to be able to describe to your audience what the data set looks like. Go ahead and title this distribution of data, and your essential questions: how can you use histograms today to characterize basic shapes of distribution? One thing I failed to leave out yesterday with our box and whisker plots was symmetrical and skewed, what those mean. So I apologize if I forgot to tell you today in class. Here's what they mean. Okay, so symmetrical means that it makes this perfect bell-shaped curve. Okay, and that means the data is evenly distributed. When you have this perfect bell-shaped graph, you're going to be using the mean and standard deviation to describe your data. Let's talk about the other possibilities, is the skewed possibilities. It's skewed left when your data set is missing a lot of data points on the left, and it's skewed right when your data set's missing a lot of data points on the right. Okay, when it's skewed left and right, you're going to be using, the mean isn't a good one to use alone because your data set's not perfect. We want to be using the middle number, the median, and this 5-point, this 5-number summary that we've talked about with box and whisker plots. So when it's skewed left and right, you want to tell your audience what the data shape looks like by using the lowest number that we've talked about with box and whisker, the highest number. You want to talk about that middle number. You want to talk about the first and third quartile. Okay, so describing symmetrical data, use mean and standard deviation. Describing skewed data, used highest points, lowest points, the middle point, and the first and third quartile. All right, let's get started with our first example. Okay, so we're looking at a frequency table showing the number of pounds of aluminum cans collected by students for a fundraiser. We're going to display this data in a histogram, and we're going to describe the shape of the distribution. Based off of the shape, that will tell us how we want to describe the data set. All right. I used a program to make my histogram. You guys are going to put this in your notes, so you're going to have lined paper, and it's going to look much better than mine if I did it by hand. So here's what happens when we make our histogram. Okay, super important that you guys have 1, a title, 2, labels for your x-axis and y-axis, and 3, you tell me how you are, what numbers you're going by, if you're going by ranges for the histogram or not. Okay, now we're ready to describe the shape. So if I'm sketching my shape out, it's not this perfectly symmetrical shape. It looks like I have more data points on the right-hand side. So this is skewed left. That's how I tell my audience. The aluminum can collection was skewed left. Now, when we look at describing the measures of central tendency that best represents this question, okay, we're going to use the middle number, and that 5-point summary, middle number, and 5-number summary, because the data points are skewed to the left. All right, let's go ahead and look at our next example. Okay, 3, you're recording the number of email attachments sent by 30 employees of a company. In 1 week, your results are shown in the table. Display the data in a histogram using 6 intervals. Okay, again, I had to use my computer to make these because Mine would have come up really horrible. Here's what our histogram would look like. Make sure you have the titles for all that I just underlined, okay? Alright, now I'm going to outline the shape for part B. It says, which measures the central tendency and dispersion best represent the data and why, okay? If this is symmetrical, so since this is symmetrical for part B, since this is symmetrical, mean and standard deviation, okay, the mean is that central tendency, the standard deviation is that dispersion, would best represent this data. Let's go ahead and go on to on your own problems. Okay. Number 1, the frequency table shows the family size of students in a classroom displaying a histogram. Pause your video. You're going to need some time to make your histogram. All you're doing for number 1 is making a histogram. Here's what you should have gotten for your histogram. Now we're going to describe it. Since most of the data points are on the left, this distribution is skewed right because it's missing a lot of points over here. All right, number 2, you're recording the number of hours that a student spent on homework during the past week. The results are shown in the table. Okay, so take that time, pause the video, make your histogram, okay? And this one's talking about central tendency and dispersion. So remember central tendency, mean, median, mode. Okay, dispersion is that standard deviation in that range. Let's see what our histogram looks like when you're done. So pause your video. All right, our histogram is skewed to the left since there's left data points missing. Okay, so we're not going to want to be using our mean and standard deviation. Okay, we're going to want to be using our middle number and that 5-number summary. We want to use the highest value, the lowest value, the middle number, and the first and third quartiles to describe this. All right, go ahead and answer your essential question and take that checkpoint. I hope you guys have a good night.